what
This
you need to do,
conference will now be recorded.
that you're doing it correctly. Dan, is that what you notice in your business? I mean, it's a different type of application, but
it is different. And just from the video side, I think this is the challenge that a lot of us deal with, that video in our world is always thought of security. And we're on this call talking about operations. It's kind of different. And Joey, you mentioned tools before. And I think when a bank comes and says, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to improve my operations, they probably don't come to the security people looking for a tool for it, but you can use the same tools, solutions, security for operations. So, I mean, I'll give you an example, what we do on our side, and it's something very simple to start with, and we actually call it operations audit. And we basically have a part of our solution that takes snapshot images every half hour, or a few hours. And the main usage of this is really for operations. So if someone wants to, monitor what's going on in 10 branches, 20, 100, etc., they're not going to go and drive to the branch. And even you could say, all right, I'm going to give you access to the videos you normally view, and they're still not going to do it. So we came up with a system where you're just giving these little snapshot images, you can email them. So if there's someone responsible for certain aspects of operations of a branch, maybe it's the way the branch is set up, maybe it's how furniture is, or outside the area, how it's maintained, those people can get certain images at an email every time of day, and you can say, all right, this branch looks good, this branch doesn't, this branch looks good. For the branch that doesn't look good, then I'm going to get on the phone, I'm going to call the manager and see what's going on. And the other thing I'll mention is that I think because we're always security oriented, we always are looking for something that's going wrong. We will isolate that we're always going to be doing that. But you could flip this around and also, let's look at the branch that does something really good and find out what's going on there, because I want to replicate that. And overall, I picked up this really great term from a smart building conference I was at recently, and they said you can't manage what you don't measure. So I heard someone, either Joey or Adam, you talked about metrics, and that's all about it. So you need to come up with a tool to be able to monitor and measure the operations. Otherwise, you can't measure it, you can't take any action on it.
When you do a transaction audit prior to the installation, what actually are you doing? Are you taking that from the teller software? Are you sitting in the branch to see how it works? Are you getting it from the data analytics? When you're doing, I keep hearing about, doing your audit and, establishing all the KPIs and all that. And I honestly, again, don't really know exactly what it is you're talking about doing or how you're doing it.
Yeah, you had that question to me, BJ?
Yeah, sure, anybody.
Yeah, I'll just start and throw it over to Adam and Joey. So on the March side, and other companies do this as well, for transactions, we will monitor the transactions at the ATM and the teller, and working with the bank and probably the fraud team, identify what they think are anomalies or unusual transactions. So it could be, a very high check cashing or something else, maybe for those that still have a cash drawer opening. So anything that, the bank has identified as kind of a KPI metric that they want to monitor and measure. So that transaction gets flagged in a report, and then allows an investigator to go after the fact and see what's going on. That's where the video comes in. So you have all these different transactions that happen today, but I don't care about the 1,000 transactions. I only care about these 10. So every day, if I have these certain transactions, then I go back and see what's going on to see if it actually was fraudulent or it's just a mistake, and maybe I need to do some training for the teller.
And on the cash automation side, it's the metrics. A lot of times, and you folks out there that resell recyclers to the end user, a lot of times, a lot of the manufacturers have metrics programs to start understanding, what is my cash utilization? You need to engage with them, or you may have developed your own right now where you know how to go in and interrogate the teller application to understand what are my cash transactions, what is my bill utilization. Some of these things can be captured from there, but a lot of the manufacturers have that. Adam came from Arca. They have that type of application. Hyosung, Glory, all of these manufacturers, ATAC, they all have these type of metrics to help you show the customer how that particular recycler or that particular software will assist your tellers in speed of transactions and doing things like this. Can I then, because I have this increase in speed at the point of a cash transaction, can I repurpose that teller and add different functionalities, give them a growth path in their employment with the financial institution to add other functions to them if that's what they want to do. So you can start learning how to adapt these metrics and bringing other departments into the equation of, okay, so we've rolled out this technology, we've got .x increase in speed of what we were normally taking. What do we want to do now from a retail branch operations? Do we want to repurpose some of these people out there and understand from video the flow of the branch or how customers are being handled within that branch? And can I position that teller because we've increased the speed? Now they're more of a universal banker. If I repurpose them, and because what I've learned from video, put them out there greeting that customer, what can we do now to increase the products that we talk about with them, and start handling your particular interest, which may be just a cash recycler? How can that better fit into their full vision of what branch transformation is? We have to bring that to them and talk about those different aspects like that, empower you folks out there, and make sure that we're all getting the branch transformation story in a package that is acceptable to that financial institution. Because we've all learned that branch transformation means different things to different people. And so whatever story you're trying to tell right there, you have the information to tell that story a little bit better to add to whatever their internal process is.
BJ, I'm glad you recorded that, because Joey, you nailed it. That was a great commercial.
Don't ask me to repeat it. I cannot.
Yeah. One of the things I've, when I think about metrics or, key performance indicators, I think with cash automation, the goal is to take less time doing a transaction tomorrow than it takes you to do that same transaction yesterday or today. And so when you're thinking about that, there's different ways that cash automation impacts time, right? It's the speed of the transaction, the reduction of dual control, being time in the vault. It may be even getting out of the branch earlier because you balance faster. So, some of the questions there, if you wanted to really get a metric or get a baseline, it would be, okay, go to your teller application and tell me how many vault buys and sells you're doing today. Go to your security company and find out on average what time does the alarm get set at the end of the day. What time does the alarm get turned off in the morning? And figure out what's happening after, either before the doors unlock, or after the doors unlock, and figure out if there's efficiency that can be gained, based on real quantifiable time from your alarm company. Now, there's going to be some where maybe the entire branch is there, and there's another department that they don't alarm the whole place. But most branches, once you're done, you balance, you go home. Everybody does. And so those are some of the real things that you can pull out from existing data, and then compare it to whatever their chief complaint or their chief strategy is, or their key goal in adding automation. I say all that to say, I think that the day of doing the real in-depth analysis on that has probably passed for some of these types of, KPI tracking. I think it's still a play, but a lot of times people are just saying, we want to do this, right? We need to be able to learn how to implement some type of new technology that the assumption is made that it's going to make them more efficient. They don't care about proving that it's going to make them more efficient. And then if that's the case, then you can move right into the operation success of implementation. And then you're focused wholly on, instead of doing data gathering and success tracking, you can go into metrics that are more like adoption, right? How many transactions are being used by this new piece of technology? Do you have outliers that are not using this and they're still running cash through their physical drawer? And so those are the kind of metrics that you can track on the back end. And maybe they're not tied directly to a pre-sale metric, but they are very quantifiable ways to say we are successful in implementing this, not necessarily targeted toward did we reach our goal of efficiency. So I think you kind of have to think about metrics for both, right? It's efficiency metrics and it's success of implementation metrics.
And Adam, that is an excellent point in the fact that you have to look at it in two separate things. What is the way that I get my original sale, and what is the way that I keep selling that particular solution into that customer? Because we all know that we have a lot of one-time buyers. It can be our job to follow up, and as Adam was saying, add those additional metrics to there. Are my tellers still keeping $3,000 in their drawer after we've added automation? How can I talk to them? And as salespeople, your job is to follow up with them and ask those secondary, okay, it's installed questions. Now let's look at these set of metrics and make sure that we are proving out what we originally thought. And we're re-educating them to, we need to look for this, because again, that's going to help drive that second and third sale, which is sometimes a tougher thing because they are not recognizing what we need to bring forward to them and make it top of mind, such as my tellers are not counting so much cash, or they're understanding patterns in the branch from video, or XXX. We need to make sure that we are bringing those and keeping them top of mind, and then it's going to be easier for them to justify that next sale, that next opportunity. All of these things like this, we can't just do a once and done type of sale approach anymore. This is a solution sale. It is an ongoing solution sale. And Dave Pepin used to be that, his mantra was, how do we get to the next sale here in the process? I mean, if you ask Dave that, he's going to give you that every time. And so we all have to think about how to get to that next process or next sale opportunity, whatever that may be. And that does look like you're engaged with the customer and you're caring about them. And what are they doing inside, and have they forgotten some of the things that we originally told them?
When would you go back? You'd go back to the branch. When would you go back? 3 days, a week, 2 weeks? How long do you give them before you come back and monitor them?
At least a month.
A month. Okay.
Because a month, then they've had time. Did they retain what we told them when the reseller was on site, the company was on site? Do they retain it? Are they following that? What we find a lot of times is the tellers will learn from each other on how to use the system. And it's just like that, the old thing of when you tell somebody a secret, then it's repeated by the time it comes back to you. It sounds nothing like the secret that you originally told.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure that they're following the processes for that institution that work best for them. And that's what you learn on the original training a lot of times. Yeah, they may have adapted some things because they figured out that doing something at this particular time was not advantageous for them. Okay, so they've moved it an hour here or there, but they still should be following the same process. So it's our job just to reinitiate them to the training that all of us have learned that's going to make them more efficient.
Yeah, just want to add something what Joey just said about how to get the next sale. So on the video side, like every bank has cameras and recorders. So, you know, that's the basic installation. But the next sale in case of the video, like in March Networks, is that business intelligence software that's a layer on top of it. And the way we get the next sale is we work with a bank branch and we try to identify a single site to do a trial with. So we get that installed in there, and then we have to work very carefully with the bank branch to show them how to set it up and to pull the data and pull the metrics that we're talking about, how to measure things out of it. And that takes a lot of work. But if you do that right and they see the ROI, then the next sale comes in because now they take this next layer solution we call Searchlight, and then they layer it on to all the other branches. So it's a little bit of trial and error, but you got to get, you get the customer, then you keep selling them more of the solution, but you got to show them the benefit as you're talking about.
And Adam and we have the same thing. Is they have a reporting program. Okay, now you've got all these recyclers out there. Do I need to see a consolidated view? They have a reporting system. We have a reporting system. And so that can be the next thing of where we need to handle or need to go to. So as a reseller, you need to be aware that, okay, maybe I've sold them all the recyclers that institution can need. Now, what is the next layer of the solution sell right there? Is it that monitoring piece that Dan was talking about? We have the reporting side to better understand a universal type of metrics on this. That is a way to take the solution that you sold them to the next iteration. And being able to explain those metrics to them and that process that Adam was talking about, that's the way you get there.
One of the quickest ways to lose an enterprise sale is to put your head in the sand after the sale and ignore the hard problems or difficulties that may come up. Pretend that they don't exist. And so any kind of change management, if you're dealing with humans, is going to be difficult. And so there's going to be things that have to be overcome throughout that implementation and post-sale, post-implementation process. And I think the way to get to that enterprise sale is through getting the humans to give narrative positive feedback, right? It's just like any one of us that's going to buy something as a consumer. One of the best ways, if you're selling B2C, is word of mouth, right? Same thing works. There's still consumers that are in businesses internally that are buying your solution. And so you've got to get to a point where those people want your solution, can't live without it, and give that feedback. And the way to do that is by not ignoring the people that don't. It's paying very close attention to the people that are having adoption issues, that are those blockers, that are the people that are just, they're Karens about everything, and they're always just trying to get, cause a reason for somebody to have, you know, some kind of conflict internally. And so if you can identify them with specific metrics like adoption metrics, like Joey was mentioning, what's your average end of day cash in drawer balance? Why do you have $4,000 at the end of your day every day? Well, it's probably because they're running a cash drawer, and they needed that money. You know, so the other piece is just looking at transaction histories, comparing productivity from the teller application, understanding, okay, well, Adam over here has not done a lot of transactions compared to Joey, and you know, there's a disconnect. So finding those quantifiable metrics that get you to the human behavior is very critical.
Adam, I think you hit on a really good point that if you can identify the people that, you know, have these real problems and they're in a management position, and you can flip them based on something you provide, they're going to become the biggest advocate for you within the rest of the banking organization. That's a great point.
And folks on the line, we're willing to help. I mean, we can provide a lot of that. I know that Adam has a lot of industry knowledge, Dan, Jared, and so reach out to your hardware software provider and say, what are the next steps that we need to do here? Let's create that checklist. We have our checklist of the initial sale. Now let's check our 1 month follow-up with them. What should we be asking? What are some things that we can help allow us to be that solution provider to them, and be that person who they can call and depend upon to getting some type of answer? Have relationships with all the various providers out there, the middleware providers, the hardware providers out there, and be able to feel comfortable in calling us to say, how can we help you, and answer that customer's question to the end user. That's things that are going to endear you and let them understand that, okay, I don't know the answer, but I know how to get the answer. And that's always something that everybody has to be comfortable in doing, is saying, okay, I don't understand everything. Let me call Dynacash. Let me call Cashware. Let me call March Networks or CFM and get you that answer, and be willing to walk through that and get back with that customer. That's the main thing that you can all do. But contact us, and we will be more than happy to assist you in what are those follow-up questions, or what are those follow-up things that you can do in that 1 month or whatever your timeline visit is, to make sure that they're getting the most out of this, the money, the system that they probably spent a lot of money getting from all of us.
I also ran into a situation on one location where the resistance was because the teller obviously was giving herself short-term loans out of her cash drawer, whether it was money for lunch or whatever. Does that come up very often? Because again, I was caught completely off guard when that happened. If it hadn't been for my installer giving me a heads up, I still wouldn't have figured out what was going on. They figured it out in a hurry. Do you often find that the resistance is because somebody's party is up? Is that, or is it just not there anymore?
Well, one of the things that we do, and Dan can probably speak to this better than any of us with the video and things like that, but one of the common answers I always give with a balancing problem with a teller is, unless somebody's stealing, we got a math problem here. And so you always kind of have to look at it like that. But Dan's product is probably the best of all of them to catch that type of issue.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's what I talked about before, where you're monitoring the transactions. That case, BJ, you talked about, you could see that. And then someone remotely using video could narrow down anytime that teller is doing a transaction. You start to watch them. You put them basically in a watch list, and you see what's going on. I mean, the exact same thing happens in the retail side. We do a lot in QSRs and C-stores. It works the exact same way. You're looking at the transactional data. You see an anomaly, an outlier, And then you start to watch them on a regular basis until you determine that either they are, you know, a criminal, or they're just, they need some better training. That's exactly how video is used.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then one of the other things that we had talked about in the change management is the person that likes to count money may not like their new role as universal banker. And that's always an issue. I mean, when you start to free somebody's time up and say, okay, well, now you get to do this in addition to your things. I think, Joey, you alluded to the fact that if they're willing, they could have an expanded role and a better role. But some of the people that are really good at counting money are really good at counting money and not real good at being outgoing or talking to people. I remember the supermarket branches would come around, and there were versions of that where they hired cheerleader types who would go out and talk to the customers and bounce around and give away pens and stuff to promote the supermarket branches. And they had to hire a completely different type of person than the teller in the branch who was focused on counting money. That must be even more complicated now with the hiring constraints and the difficulty of finding people. So I guess the other problem you have is now you're trying to work with the existing staff because they're hard to replace, and you're telling them that their role has changed and you want them to do these additional things. There's a real change management issue. Have any of you seen anybody do a particularly good job of that when you've been out in the field?
There's one bank, small credit union that's up in upstate New York, and they have a bunch of locations in Watertown. And they went through branch transformation, and their branches typically have 3 people. There are 2 tellers and the manager, branch manager, who does not have an office. And I met with her, and her office is a little kiosk in the front of the branch. And she's the person that you talked about that is the greeter, and she has to be, very charismatic and be able to talk and remember people's names and how is your family doing, etc. So that I think is just the way of the world. That's one example of how one bank address what you're talking about. But yeah, I completely agree. Change has to happen, otherwise, these banks aren't going to survive. I mean, it affects their bottom line.
Yeah.
Well, we have to be, as far as folks that are helping other folks sell branch transformation, be armed to have those conversations, because I've had banks ask us, what type of person needs to work with this technology and this solution that you're selling here? And we'll kind of go, okay, you probably maybe not want in my business that person that has been a teller for 40 years. They're not going to adapt my technology and my solution very easily. I've been amazed sometimes that some of those they're your champion, but in most cases they're not going to be the champion out there that we need in that solution. So we'll have those conversations. Mr. or Ms. Banker, look at your staff, find somebody who's willing to, that is calm, as we talked about a little bit earlier, and is willing to look at change and be accepting of that. When you've rolled out other projects within that branch, who's been your champion then? You may want to bring them into the solution of being that person who's going to take the lead here. And let's tell Adam, tell Joey, spend some extra time with them. Make sure they understand it, and spend the time with them just to make sure that the solution that person, that project, or that project owner, they've spent money on here, let's make sure it's successful from your perspective and ours.
Yeah. I remember being,
I think we have. Sorry, go ahead, BJ.
I remember being on an installation, I'm not sure who I was with, where the head teller had been, again, in that job a long time. We had erroneously picked them as our focus person, but the assistant was spot on, right on it, and became the champion. And it was interesting to watch her kind of take over that role. You have this person that doesn't want to be involved. You know, this person thinks this is new and really cool, and the installer was really cute, and she's having a great time. And all of a sudden, she's got all of this information, understanding it, and is like Joey said, you know, the tellers train each other. Somebody be doing something and they have a question, and she said, well, instead of doing that, you do this now. And they would communicate to each other, you know, instantly, quickly in a language of the branch, which was really pretty cool. So I saw that happen, you know, at a time where the head teller, if she could have, would have just had us leave. She didn't want the change. She didn't want the process. She knew everything and had done it this way and had trained all those people and had a hold over them and seniority. And in an instant of us coming in the door with a piece of machinery, that all evaporated, and this person was not happy. And luckily, again, we found the champion in the branch. In spite of, you know, my lack of knowledge, we had a champion in the branch that took over and ran with it. And the change was quick and much easier because of their involvement. So I learned to look from that original thing of, oh gosh, this lady just wants us out of here. She didn't even want us coming in the door with the thing, you know. It was scary.
Oh, go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
One thing on the just kind of the human psychology side of things. Do your installation technicians know the value proposition of whatever software or hardware is that you're selling? Do the people that are doing the training know what's in it for the teller to implement this? Can you go up to anybody that installs and trains today and say, okay, Adam, tell me why a bank or credit union would implement X technology? Can they rattle off 4 or 5 reasons why, and why it would impact the teller? Because what that technician or that trainer needs to keep going back to, if they're really running into somebody butting heads, is to be able to share the specific value propositions that is going to significantly impact their day-to-day operation at the teller level, right? Their job, their 9 to 5, you know, their day from 9 to 5 is going to be better because of X technology. And if your implementation people can't do that, help them.
Yeah.
And if you have the possibility as salespeople or project owners out there, you can go along with your installer, because that helps them focus on getting the thing installed up and right, and you're watching the customer and answering those questions to get those people comfortable with the solution. I mean, it's always helpful to have that extra set of eyes out there who's going to take care of the human aspect, as Adam was talking about, to make sure that they can answer that question while my installer can just focus and get it up as quickly as possible. Please look at doing something like that, because it's just going to enhance the solution for them.
Oh, Joey, that's so true, to have that second person who's standing back and watching the dynamic in the branch. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah.
Because they can have that moment to say, well, you know I hear you talking about this balancing thing. Let me talk to you a little bit about that, what that is, and then my installer, my trainer will show you that in real life as soon as everything's ready. And they're just engaged with the customer. They're giving the installer the time to make sure that everything's done right, and not 20 questions are being thrown at them at that time, and they're trying to focus on how to get this thing connected, how to get it up, how to get it configured correctly for that institution.
Yep, absolutely.
It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing from a reseller's perspective and from a financial institution's perspective. The original part of this section of this question, BJ, was, well, what do you do with people that just aren't cut it? You know, they don't cut it for technology, but they're great tellers. Well, you've got implementation people that are darn good at knowing IP addresses and network protocol and thin client environments, but they can't have a very, feel good conversation with someone. They don't have that skill set. So it's the same thing, right? What do you do with your staff to make sure that the financial institution has success? And then on the financial institution, what do you do with those people that are in roles that are going to change? I was a branch manager for a long time in a bank, and I got to the point as a manager where I had people that had been with the company for a long, long time, and they were just constantly non-adopters. And I had to have really hard conversations of, is this what you want to do? Is this the job for you? And if not, let me help you find something different. It's a tough conversation, but it is one that unfortunately has to be had at some point in a management's career.
Yeah. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left. There are some people on here. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to talk a little bit more about? You could use your chat box. So let me know if you have anything. The other thing I found interesting in our conversations is, when I was first involved with this, they were always talking about, eliminating a full-time employee or cutting down the head count in the branch. And it seems like when you go in the branches now, there's nobody in there. So, they're getting speed of service, but geez, could they possibly cut the branch staff anymore? There wouldn't be anybody in there. I mean, I'm looking at Dan's idea where the branch manager's the greeter with the Walmart, how can I help you? And there's 2 tellers in there. I mean, the idea of cutting that branch staff anymore, you can't have one person in the branch. It seems like when you go in, it's pretty bleak for the most part. So, again,
Well, that really depends upon your area of the country. I mean, we'll go to somewhere, we're in the Atlanta area, and we go to branches around here, and yes, it's kind of like that, BJ. I mean, they could rent out half the building because they have this 9 teller line there, and there's 1 or 2 people on it. But you go to some of the other areas of the country, they've got 9 tellers, and they're all stacked. It really, a lot of it depends upon the area of the country you're in and your customer base, because a lot of folks use a visit to the bank as a social experiment. I mean, they are coming in there and they know Sarah, their teller, or Bob, their teller, and that's a highlight of their week of talking to that person and doing things. So we have to be understanding of that and being able to adapt our story or our message about our product to that scenario. And that's what you always have to be cognizant of. And do those kind of things like that, is be willing, and then follow up with that a month later. How are your 9 tellers doing with my 5 recyclers or my video system or whatever that happens to be, and poll them, each one of them, find out, and then that will make sure that you're addressing that, maybe that squeaky wheel that's down the line and maybe squeaking and causing more issues that are really not issues for you, and you're able to address it right then. And then you get to that, okay, they're rolling out a second branch. Then maybe they want 5 more recyclers and 5 more middlewares and more video out there. Be willing to address those things and have the tough conversations, as Adam was saying.
Yeah.
And just to add, besides the people walking the branch, I mean, there's also a lot of activity in the drive-through, especially since COVID. A lot of people are just like staying in their cars.
Yep. Yeah, contactless is like, well, you remember the first couple of weeks that everything was shut down, and so many of these branches, the drive-ups weren't even operational. Around here in the Durham, North Carolina, you know, my local Bank of America branch had 2 drive-up lanes and they were shut down. They weren't in use. And all of a sudden, and I heard that from FSPA members all over the country, suddenly looking for all these incredibly obsolete drive-ups to be brought up to working order, and preferably in 2 to 3 days. Thank you very much. You know, the things that hadn't been in use for years. So all of a sudden, yes, that was definitely driving a whole lot of pandemonium in the you know, bank solution providers that belong to FSPA. Was just the let's get everything to contactless. And you know, we had a cartoon in one of these sessions that we did of this giant wrecking ball coming at, you know, how did your branch transformation, what brought forward your branch transformation? And it was the COVID ball coming at the branch, right? I mean, it just mowed everybody over that they suddenly had to adopt this technology. And I think things aren't going to settle down for a while because there aren't enough staff. You can't hire people. So that trend to automation and that push for automation continues, to get everything to speed of service, doing the most you can with the fewest number of people, which actually comes down, isn't that what operations is all about, is maximizing your resources in the branch to accomplish the most you can with as little as you have. So I see this trend continuing, and the push for automation really becoming a big issue if the employment picture stays the same. So so I don't see any questions. Do any of you have anything else that you'd like to say to close things up for today?
The main thing I want to say is make sure you use your resources out there. Use an Adam, use a Dan, use me, use Jared out there with our respective products, and give you some different ways of thinking about how you can sell these solutions into these various institutions. That we're your resources. Yes, we have our individual need or wants to move our product out there, but we're willing to help. I mean, and that's the main thing, because you're going to run across questions out there that you haven't thought about, or processes that they're interested in. And we've probably seen a lot of it because we've been asked this question before, not because we thought of it, but we have smarter people that we hang around and we learn things from, and we can pass that information along.
Thank you. I'd also like to just let people know we have another session coming up that I haven't set up yet for October 20th. If on the call today we touched on something that you'd like to, you know, continue the discussion, please just email me. You can also text to the FSPA number 919-648-0664. Email me, bj@fspa1.com, and we'll direct our next topic to whatever people are the most interested in, what is on everybody's minds, and watch your inbox for the promotions for October 20th. And thank you to my crew today, and welcome Jared Jones to the committee. And thank you everybody for your time. We did record this session. It will be up on the FSPA website in a few days in case you want to go back and review it. And thanks again to my committee for your time today and the effort that you put forth. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, BJ.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.